What is it that makes a villain memorable? Is it some sort of emotional side to their character? Perhaps a cool design or voice? In today's video, we're taking a look at two of Ninjago's most iconic villains and why the show was so successful with them. Hi everyone, and welcome back for today's video, in which we'll be discussing the characters of Garbot and Ross and why they're so iconic as villains. That's not to say that these are the only iconic Ninjago villains. Ruby comes to mind, as well as villains like Moro and Nadakad, but it's fair to say Garbot is the Ninjago villain. He is such a core part of the show's brand, and I feel like in a couple years when Dragon's Rising is over, we're going to be saying the same about Ross. We're going to discuss Garbot first. And from the very first Ninjago installment, Garbot was very closely tied to the show's universe and history. At this point in the show, the entire plot was surrounding the golden weapons, both the past and the present. And just as most fans today remember those weapons as being iconic, it's easy to make that connection to Garbot as well. There's also a lot of other stuff in these early seasons that Garbot was around for, like how the entire show was hyping up his battle with the Green Ninja, and how he eventually teamed up with the Overlord. This is all stuff that was really iconic about early Ninjago, and it's stuff Garbot was there for. But something that's even more memorable about Garbot is that he's a deeply personal villain for the ninja. Of course, he is Wu's brother, and their history was really the first bit of history ever shared about Ninjago. But probably the most important reason why Garbot is such an iconic villain is his relationship with his son. Lloyd and Garbot's relationship was a part of almost all 15 original seasons. It is probably one of the most important stories of the entire show. It was a very unique dynamic between these two, and it was very emotional and creative for a children's show. Introducing Lloyd into the show changed Garbot from just being a typical villain into a compelling, well-balanced character who was more than just a villain. At this point forward, the show treated Garbot with more attention than it did for most other villains. We saw him as a hero for a couple seasons, and even later in the show, he came back as a villain again, and then he had a proper multi-season redemption story. My point here is that the show expanded Garbot into much more than just a villain. And yeah, he is a villain, but he's remembered as being a complex character who's more than just evil. It's the reason why he'll probably always be Ninjago's most iconic villain. Fast forward to today, and I think we're witnessing another iconic villain being written. I feel confident in saying that in a couple years, Ninjago fans will look back at these Dragon's Rising seasons, and it's going to be Ross who's the standout iconic villain, but for completely different reasons as Garbot. I think a pretty good analogy here is if you think about Star Wars, you have Darth Vader and the Emperor, and Vader is viewed as this tragic character, again with the father-son dynamic. But on the other side, you have the Emperor, who's just completely evil and manipulative, and this mastermind behind all the terrible things that have happened. I think this is the kind of iconic villain that Ross is shaping up to be. First of all, having Ross for the entire show so far has allowed him to develop in a way most other villains just haven't. We've seen him infiltrating Imperium, we've seen him as a master commanding other elemental masters, and above all, we've seen him as this agent of a greater evil. Even now, there's just so much more that defines his character compared to other villains. But also these two seasons, he's had such a huge impact on Ninjago and the team so far. In the most recent episodes, he convinced Eren to join him and leave the ninja team, and that's just not something we've seen any other villain do. But probably the most iconic part about his character is that the show is playing the long game with them. There's so little we know about Ross, and that's what makes him such a mysterious and fascinating character. There have been hints at his backstory, his motivations, and his master, but nothing too big yet. But at the same time, Ross has been established as one of Ninjago's most dangerous villains yet, threatening the existence of Ninjago's gods. What's gonna make Ross an iconic villain is that, yeah, he is a pure evil villain, but there's something that's just interesting and fun about that type of evil. But also, the show is allowing his character to expand and grow over years, rather than confining him to a single season, as the show has often done in the past. And seeing the ninja face him over and over again, in a way, I think he's kind of becoming the modern-day Garbot, and it's really cool to see that happening to another Ninjago villain. If you were to ask me why Garbot and Ross are great villains, my reasons would be completely different. But what's in common here is that the show was willing to give them time to develop and a lot of focus. And for a show with so many characters and seasons, that truly matters for making these stories stand out. And that's about all for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe, share with anyone Devin you know, and let me know what you guys thought about these characters and other iconic Ninjago villains that I could have mentioned, and I'll see you guys next time.